Greetings and salutations, fellow humans. Just seeing we're streaming, so we are. How are you all doing today? My goodness, I woke up with an absolute headache today. I woke up with an enormous headache and I was feeling very queasy. Things have sort of evened out now. I think I've been taking good care of myself over the day, drinking lots of fluids, drinking lots of water. I got my tea here, settle my little tum-tum, all of that kind of stuff. But man, it's just been like an absolute wipeout for me, just across the board. So, if I feel a little, I don't know, queasy or uncertain today, it's 100% that's what's going on with me. Oh. Well, we've got a beautiful thing going on here, a beautiful day. Just waiting for people to come into the chat. Hey, Chris, you're the first one in today, bud. Good to see you. Good to see you, bud. How are things where you're at? I'm having a very sort of queasy day today, so I think I'm going to take this one nice and slow. Very unlikely that there's going to be a big conflagration. And then on top of that, the clip that I made for today was revolving around Taiwan and China. And oh man, the amount of hate that I've been getting. Hey, Major Hydraulic, how you doing? Good to see you, bud. How are things going for you? The amount of hate that I've gotten today from just like the absolute bottom of the barrel types and with this last clip that I put out there. It really shows you, like, I'm really beginning to learn of our own society. Like, we're starting to wake up a little bit in regards to issues of homelessness and drug use and things like this. There's starting to be a little bit of empathy that's starting to crack through. Hello to you, Bumbleguppy. A good bread day to you as well. Yeah, things are okay here outside of being deep rural, conservative, capitalist hellhole. Oh yeah, well, besides that though. Like, I'm beginning to learn and see that there is empathy that's beginning to like it's at least to the point now in the conversation where you can't outright dismiss or denigrate the homeless without getting piled on. It seems as though the people who are walking around saying, oh, we should just abandon homeless people, we should just abandon disabled people, all of this, are at the very least getting called out for it, and there's like a big piling on happening. And that's good. That seems to be a small shift. And there seems to be a mistrust of the media generally. But when it comes to China, people are in lockstep with their media. They believe everything they're being told about their media. There's the narrative is firmly entrenched, and if you attempt to countervail that, people are going to dump on you for it. So as long as you're white, then you can have some empathy. But if you're not white, then it seems like the war drum pounds. Capitalism's been doing a great job proving socialists right. Yeah, it always has been. Like, capitalism never had any credibility. It just had lots of money to propagandize people, right? And people are pretty... I have to stop using the word gullible. Like, I do have to stop using the word gullible. People are trusting. Maybe that's the better word to use. People are trusting. While people might claim a certain level of skepticism in regards to their government, there still is built in, and it seems like it is built in, there are thresholds where people aren't willing to go. People aren't willing to accept the reality of their leadership and of the billionaire class, that they are psychopathic, right? They're not willing to get to that level. Like, they're willing to have like a general skepticism, but they're not willing to take the next like obvious step, which is that what's being done is being done on purpose. That seems to be what it is. That people are willing to accept that there is a things are going wrong, but it's about negligence. Like, that's what it is. That oh, they just don't care about us. I hear a lot about that. But like, people are not willing to take the step to say that no, they do care. They just care to spread suffering. Like, that's what they're here to do. And so that kind of level of trust, where there is trust for these people, doesn't allow them to take the next step into things like the Chinese conversation, where, like, obviously we're being lied to about what's going on in China. Like, obviously we're being lied to in regards to what's happening. And today has been a very kind of harrowing realization that when it comes to foreign issues, we basically, our position is let's invade who we want. Like, it seems to be the case. Like, oh, we'll just bomb whoever we want, and what are they going to do about it? It seems to be the case. I'm good. Too many books I want to read, but I dislike reading. You know, but I have that problem too, in a way. I spend so much time reading articles online and like staying apprised of what's going on in the news and trying to form a perspective, that I have books that I've been like chewing through, but like, especially fiction, I just cannot disassociate. Because usually fiction books, I like start reading a fiction book and I'm like, this is way less interesting than what is actually happening in the world today. That like, that's what's so surprising to me, right? Like, people really want to be entertained, and they want good stories, and they want this kind of stuff. But like, they don't seem willing to connect to the most interesting stories that are happening today. And I think it's because people have it's depressing, you know? It's kind of depressing getting to know the antagonists. It's depressing to see that the protagonists of the story are so weak. Like, we have such an incredible underdog story going on here, that if the protagonists are able to turn this around and seize any kind of victory, it would be like one of the greatest stories ever told. Kind of on the same level as the October Revolution that happened in the Soviet Union. Like, there's an enormous underdog story, and they managed to pull it off because the Tsars became weak and lost a lot of military support. Hasn't quite happened yet here in America, so we'll see. So people usually use fiction as a way to disassociate and as a way to disconnect from what's going on, and I find that to be very difficult. I find it to be very difficult to disconnect. The only story that I'm really still chewing through is American Gods by Neil Gaiman, because it's the rare story where I don't know what the ending is actually going to be. If I don't know what the ending is actually going to be in your story, chances are good that I'm actually going to finish it. But if I'm about halfway through and I'm like Hunger Games. Hunger Games is exactly this. Like, I knew exactly how that story was going to end, basically from chapter 1. Because it's pretty standard, right? Like, pretty standard trajectory, right? Like, not too many twists and turns, right? It's a classic hero's journey story with a pretty predictable ending, and so I'm just like, you know, I've seen it, I've read it, I've done this before. Like, why do I need to go through it again? I don't really care about Katniss Evergreen. I don't actually find the world that she lives in to be particularly believable. Although the general themes, I understand. Like, we are kind of going to a Hunger Games sort of place. Like, what is Shark Tank, right? Like Shark Tank or Dragon's Den. Like, these have a Hunger Games kind of quality to them, that here are these rich people who want to, who you have to impress in order to get, you know, any kind of furthering of your etc. and so on and blah blah blah, right? And it's like, I find those shows to be really embarrassing, honestly. Like, how can we, like, we genuinely think that we live in a serious society and a show like that is on TV? Like, no, like it's pretty cringy, honestly. It's pretty cringy. Okay, guys, let's move in to today's number, just for fun. Maybe today's the day where I'll win. I'll feel good about myself. I'm going with a 5. I know that there's 3 guys in the chat at least.
Here we go for today's number.
That's a bit loud.
It's October 5,
It's just
2021.
I just love that it's David Lynch. We got a 3.
Each
Mark,
ball
good to
has
see
a
you, Mark.
number.
Got a 7.
Numbers 1 through
Perfect.
10.
Perfect.
Swirl
the numbers. I hope it's a 10, because then it'll be like, I'll be able to make all kinds of, like, 7 plus 3. Come on, 5. Let's go 5.
Today's number is
6.
6.
God damn it, they're making fun of me. Oh, they're making fun of me. Everybody missed it. Everybody missed it with a 6. We had 2 7s, a 3. How can we make this work? And a 5. So 7 plus 7 is 14, 15, 16, 17. Plus 5 is 22. Divided by 4. That'd be so funny if that worked out. 10 minus 7 plus 3. We did it. We did it. Although I didn't say 10, dude. I said 5. So 5 times, but why times it by whatever. Moving on. You know what, guys? This makes sense. I woke up today with a big headache, feeling queasy, all that kind of stuff. It makes sense that we're all losers today. That's fine. We're all losers today. We stand in solidarity with one another as powerful losers, right? That's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. I just got to say, guys, and I'm feeling it right now. I'm so happy that you guys are here. I'm so happy that you guys come in and that we all get to chat with one another about the insanity of what this ridiculous nonsense is. Like, this is ridiculous nonsense that we're all collectively experiencing. I just can't even imagine why anybody thinks that any of this is normal or rational or any of this. Like, it's just so nuts. Yeah, I was so looking forward to getting nothing. Now I'm left here with solidarity. Sorry to disappoint you, Bumbleguppy. Sorry to disappoint you, bud. I'll, you know what? From here on out, I'll give you nothing every day. What do you think? So, a beautiful article here from the Canada Files. Exclusive. How the NED, Open Society Foundations, and NATO collectively fund institutions driving development of Canadian political thought. Really, really wonderful article. Big, long, chunky guy. You know what? I'm in the mood to do so I'm going to read this one out loud because I think, first of all, the Canadian Files, really, really great institution. Everything that's been coming out of the Canada Files this last year, I've been very impressed by. I don't know anything about Aidan Jonah, but I mean, especially as we're writing about how important it is to understand what the NED is, what Open Society Foundations, and of course what NATO is. And if you don't really know what these organizations are, then you can make all kinds of crazy, wonky decisions based on all kinds of stuff. Be like, well, this organization said this. It's like, well, yeah, it's the fucking NED. Like, they're going to say what they're going to say. So, written by Aidan Jonah. People think that Canadian public discourse is mostly by Canadians about Canadian priorities, but the amount of direct influence from abroad is staggering. Organizations that represent global neoliberalism, from NATO to the NED to those sponsored by Open Society Foundations, involve themselves in the creation of thought in Canada. Organizations with Canadian names, from universities to neutral-sounding civil society organizations, have been documented as recipients of foreign cash. What does this mean for their priorities, and how does it impact what they are telling us? It's possible to see at least 3 areas in which separate donors are intervening in Canadian civil society. First, Open Society Foundations is quietly funding 3 Canadian NGOs. And because there is a significant funding presence of wealthy American foundations here, we can observe a second NGO in Canada taking funding from the regime change organization known as the National Endowment for Democracy. All the while, there is a previously unknown NATO propaganda organization in Canada, which has existed since 1966. In these 3 examples alone, it is possible to see how the development of political thought in Canada receives assistance from abroad. Open Society Foundations and Transparency International, friends from the beginning. Foundations funded by financier George Soros have earned reputations of being used to push for regime change in socialist and independent countries. Soros is not the main figure in any sort of massive conspiracy. He is simply a subcontractor for U.S. efforts to open countries to its penetration. The main thrust behind his open society interventions is to keep societies open for business in the U.S.-dominated international system. Although he has, in the past, focused mainly on socialist countries, the idea of open society applies to everyone. From utilizing his quantum fund to fund anti-communist groups and organizations beginning in 1984 in Hungary and other Soviet bloc countries until the collapse of the Soviet Union, Soros's early funds were definitive contributors to the collapse of socialism in Europe. Soros also founded the short-lived China Fund from 1986 to 1989, endowing it with more than $1 million USD to start. China cracked down on the China Fund in 1989. Since then, Soros has been an aggressive and vocal opponent of China, advocating fiercely for the liberalization of a socialist economic structure which has had, and continues to have, majority support from their population. While the Cold War against the USSR ended with its fall, open society has continued to relentlessly push for liberalization of any countries which don't subscribe to neoliberalism, attempts to subtly coerce them into the international neoliberal system. Between 1989 to 1994, while the Soviet Union was in free fall, Open Society Foundation would establish a network of offices in Albania, the Baltic States, Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Moldavia, Romania, and Slovakia. During these years, in 1993 specifically, Transparency International was founded. Requests to obtain annual reports between 1993 to 2002 were initially responded to, but no reports were ever sent to the Canada files. In 1996, an unaccredited... What is this symbol, do you think? T1? Oh, it's because of that. Getting old. Unaccredited T1 chapter was started in Canada, which became a registered charity in 2009, eventually accredited in 2020. In 1998, Susan Cote Freeman joined the Transparency International Secretariat. For the years that T1's annual reports are publicly available, between 2003 to 2012, no reports between 13 and 18, with a return in 19 and 20, CIDA would provide Transparency International with no less than 200,000 euros and set up 1 million euros a year. Financial reports indicate that CIDA supported Transparency International financially as early as 1999. The earliest publicly available T1 financial report is in 1999, with the first annual report in 2003. In this report, Open Society Institute Hungary is listed as a donor in the 100k to 249k euros per year level. Former Canadian Secretary of State Hugues Lebel became T1 chair in 2005 after joining the T1 advisory board 5 years earlier in 2000. Her bio is one which is filled with Canadian government positions. Of particular note is that Lebel served as the president of CIDA from 1993 to 1999. Hugues Lebel has served for a period of 19 years as Deputy Minister of different Canadian government departments, including the Secretary of State, Transport Canada, the Public Service Commission, and the Canadian International Development Agency. Since the early days of Transparency International, CIDA and Open Society have had a friendly relationship, owing to their common desire to spread neoliberalism across the globe. Transparency International Canada would not begin to publicly release annual reports until 2018, 22 years after its founding. The odd case of Plan Africa Canada, Impact, and Open Society Foundations. Note, the time periods for each year is based from between April 1st of the current year to March 31st of the next year. Example, the 2010 figures are based off of PAC's annual reports and are referring to fundraising numbers from April 1st, 2010 and March 31st, 2011. In 2010, Susan Cote Freeman, a longtime employee of the Transparency International Secretariat, joined the board of directors of Plan Africa Canada. PAC was originally established in 1986 as a Canadian civil society coalition tasked with distributing funding from the Canadian International Developing Agency to address the root causes of conflict and to promote development in Africa. PAC stopped distributing CID funds in the mid-1990s. During 2009, PAC had received a combined $360,691 from CIDA and International Development Research Centre, Canada. In 2010, the year Cote Freeman joined, PAC's funding from Canadian government agency had increased to $428,726. In 2011, PAC's funding from these agencies was $400,000. Very specific numbers. I'm going to round these numbers, guys. $400,000. In 2012, this funding increased to $600,000 as Cote Freeman became vice president of the PAC board. In 2013, this funding increased to $750,000 as Cote Freeman rose to become the president of the PAC board. As Canada's aid budget sustained a 7.5% cut worth $377 million under the Harper government, Canadian agency funding crashed to $22,000 in 2014 and sat at a meager $3,000 in 2015. However, with the election of Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party to power on October 2015, the funding surged from almost nothing to $1 million in 2016. It was 2016 that a branding and name change occurred from Plan Africa Canada to Impact. By 2017, Impact was receiving $2.5 million from Canadian agencies. In 2018, Cote Freeman stepped down as the president of Impact's board, but still served on the board as Impact received $3.5 million from Canadian agencies. In 2019, the year with the last available Impact annual report, their funding from Canadian agencies increased slightly to $3.5 million. Cote Freeman left the board during July 2020. Cote Freeman, while serving on the Impact board for the entirety of the 2010s, would work for the Transparency International Secretariat from 1998 to 2016, according to her own LinkedIn. In 2017, while Cote Freeman was still serving as a president of the Impact board, Impact would begin administering George Soros's Open Society Foundation's grants to Transparency International Canada. According to T1 Canada's 2019 annual report, in 2018, TI Canada received a top-up grant to $25,000 received in 2017 from the Open Society Foundation. The top-up totals $83,000 for 1 year. Oh my goodness, this is like reading the book of Numbers. I have to be straight. I am going to stop. Let's see if we can get to a conclusion here. Sorry, guys. I hadn't pre-read this one. It's very much like... So, in 2017, NATO's AC corporate members included AHEPA Toronto, General Dynamics Canada, Macedonia 2025, Momentum Aerospace Groups, the Chaos Group, SecDev, Center Arc, and with 4 tiers of sponsorship, the 2018 and 2019 donations page, Diamond sponsorship, apparently none, Bercadia, Onyx, BMO, TD Bank, Power Corporation of Canada. So what this article really is really showing me how intertwined all of this is. A few particularly eye-catching groups included in the sponsors and partners page are below. NATO, Latvian Minister of Defense, the Globe and Mail, In Magazine, Now Toronto, that's Now Magazine here in Toronto, General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin, Royal Canadian Military Institute, Canadian Forces College Foundation. So there's a lot of incestuous relationships happening here, where a lot of Canadian institutions are really in bed with one another and are really working together in order to continue manipulating public opinion, right? To groom a public opinion. Do you want to come up, buddy? you want to come up? Oh, come on. Don't be like that. Don't be like that. Okay. Oh, you just want to play. I got a little pup over here, and he's distracting me, guys. He's distracting me. He's a little puggy guy. Oh, man. I hope you guys haven't tuned out from that one. That was a boring one, honestly. Sorry about that. This particular article I thought was going to be very illuminating, and it is illuminating in regards to like its core information and all of that. But like it's like sometimes you read an article and you're like, oh wow, this has like a lot of intricate detailing sort of stuff. When I would like something a little bit more broad. Anyway, I'm going to move on. I'm just surprised that an old white male billionaire, Soros, is an anti-communist. I know, right? How shocking, Bumbleguppy. How shocking. So, this week's union roundup is a big one. Lots of strike activity all over the country. On strike, 2,000 Buffalo hospital workers, 2,000 Washington carpenters, 1,000 Alabama miners, 700 Massachusetts nurses, 450 West Virginia steelworkers, Kentucky whiskey workers, janitors, etc., etc., and there's also potential strikes brewing as well. 665,000 film and TV workers, 37,000 Kaiser healthcare workers, and on the list goes. There are becoming more and more strike actions that are beginning to take place because people are beginning to see straight out that if they don't fight for themselves, the system is not designed to actually change itself. The system's not designed to reform itself. It is, in fact, designed to do the opposite, to purposefully regress itself. That anytime we gain anything, it isn't actually because of the political system that exists in North America. It is in spite of it. That it takes mass mobilization, enormous pushes, from huge popular support surrounding the halls of power for lengthy periods of time to actually get anything done in this country to benefit the populace and to benefit the country itself, frankly, right? Like the idea that anything that's being done today is actually I can't believe I was being paid by Soros and you were being paid by Soros? Unbelievable. I mean, this is the thing, is that it's getting to be inescapable. Like, people don't I say this over and over on this channel, but it's always worth restating. People don't really understand how much money these guys actually have, right? Like, if you've got $100 billion, like, you can do all kinds of crazy, nutty shit. Worth bringing up right now is very popular on Netflix at the moment is the game called The Squid Game. I'm not going to spoil anything for anyone, but the reason why The Squid Game is as popular as it is right now is because it is a complete indictment of wealth hoarding. It is a complete indictment of a society that hoards wealth and of the manic greed that exists in the society and what people are willing to do when desperate in a society that worships greed the way that we do. So highly advise watching The Squid Game. The moral of The Squid Game is that wealth accumulation will turn people into sociopaths, which is one of the major themes on this channel. So please seek out The Squid Game and watch it. It's a great show. Very violent. I'm not gonna I wouldn't say very violent. Like, it's not the worst I've ever seen in terms of like gruesomeness or gore or anything like that. But I just wanted to put that out there as a warning. If you don't want to watch people die, don't watch The Squid Game. But if you're fine with that and you want to see like an indictment of a wealth-based system that we have, Squid Game is where you want to go. Mocked is saying, excuse me, but my Baltic German grandpa who owned manors in Lithuania committed anti-Semitic pogroms and was a Oberstrombannerführer. How's that? in the SS was rightfully punished by Stalin during the second occupation. All right. All right. I don't know what that's in reference to, but okay. I wasn't really involved with Soros. You had me, Major. You had me. I agree about the system not changing itself. Here in the U.S., the myth that FDR made sweeping reforms like some philosopher king, and it was communist socialist unions that bullied him all to do it. Yeah. Like, I mean, FDR was the man in power, but he understood explicitly that if he didn't do these things, there would be a revolution. Like, the people in the streets were calling for revolution. They could have 100% walked into the halls of power and ended it. Like, they could have done that, and should have, if you ask me. Like, I will always say, of the communists and the socialists and the unionists throughout the FDR period, that their error, and it was an error, their error was not simply completing the revolution and getting rid of these capitalists. And we're seeing the consequences of that. Like, sure, those guys, as well as their kids, had a more reasonable time of it because of the concessions that were given by the capitalists. But but now we're seeing that the capitalists will absolutely dismantle all of this, right? Like, as long as there are capitalists, Milo, dude, what are you on about? As long as there are capitalists, there is always the threat of regression, because the system itself is actually built to regress. It's not built to progress. It's built to regress. And as long as the only way to change this or to fix this would be to redraw the Constitution, which should be redrawn, right? The United States Constitution should be redrawn or at least amended. But the structure of the entire system, is designed to make sure that any reforms that actually happen can be easily pulled back. And we're seeing that in the United States now with the abortion legislation that's going through, right? That many states are regressing the society backwards. And look at how easily that's happening, right? That to get like something like Roe v. Wade in place in the first place was this enormous effort and this enormous push, a years-long struggle in order to get something like this legislation passed in the first place. And now it's being dismantled in a matter of weeks, right? Because the system is designed to do that kind of thing. Like, and you also have an assault against the civil rights movement, right? That the civil rights movement has struggled for decades and decades and decades to get to where they are, and now it's taking weeks to dismantle most of it, right? So it's becoming, and in the meantime, people are standing around pretending as though the system is functioning somehow. What is happening in the chat? DM, I'll get you an in with Soros. We could get you paid for your agitprop. What the heck is happening with George? Do you guys all know George Soros? Is George Soros? Like, George Soros is one of those billionaires that I generally don't pay that much attention to, honestly. I mean, he looks like a fucking orc. Like, he looks like a ghoul from the beginning of it, right? Like, he looks like an old kind of goblin, you know? Just like an exhausted, soulless vampire type. And, like... And this is just confirming what we were reading about in that article, right? Having donated more than $32 billion to the Open Society foundations, of which $15 billion have already been distributed. Like, the guy is literally spending his fortune in order to destroy other nations. Like, that's literally what he's doing with his money. And... like, again, we shouldn't allow billionaires to exist. Like, the idea that a single billionaire can just build institutions designed specifically to destroy other nations as they attempt to figure themselves out. Like, no. These guys should have their wealth stripped. They should no longer be they should be able to participate in the system the same way that the rest of us do, right? And this idea that there should be billionaires walking around erecting institutions like the NED to lie to us constantly. It's staggering. It's staggering that we tolerate it. Yeah, I completely agree with this sentiment. The way that so many people have become incapacitated by immeasurable grief and depression and pain over the past year, and it has been watered down to burnout and how to avoid it so you can do better work, makes me want to start smashing things. Yeah, I mean, you guys know me. Like, my position is that we should all stop. Like, we should stop everything. We should stop participating in this absurd system. We should stop participating in this absolute nut job society that's not a society, it's just a business that is constantly fighting with itself, that's constantly at odds with itself. Like, no, I think that we should break up with this system. Like, I think that we should break up with this arrangement. It doesn't work. Don't forget to microdose for productivity, exactly. Although I would absolutely love to do some mushrooms right now. I gotta tell you, I love that shit. That's good stuff. Especially like small amounts. You know, you have a small amount, you go for a walk on the beach. It's really nice. Defund the police. Total number of people killed by law enforcement. Most recent year with available data. Like, yeah, everything's totally fine, right? Everything's totally fine. Like, America is already in a civil war. It's just not being reported as a civil war, right? Like, because if you were to actually start talking about it as a civil war, you'd actually have to start drawing up sides and try to de-obfuscate what is actually happening, right? And of course, you'd also have to, the police are on one side. Like, that's something that you would have to admit fully, that the police are a military force, an occupying force that exists in many cases, and that the United States maintains its order or control of its society mainly through force, murder, and imprisonment. Like, that's how they roll. And it's being made just as a business decision, right? That these guys that got into office and got into power saying we should run this place like a business are. And if you run your society like a business, then it makes sense to imprison people, shoot them in the streets, and give enormous amounts of money to the people who are doing that job, right? Black Americans are 3.23 times more likely to be killed by the police than by white Americans. People with untreated mental illness are 16 times more likely to be killed by the police. Disabled individuals make up between 1/3 and half of those killed by the police. I'm going to say that last one again. Disabled individuals make up between 1/3 and half of those killed by the police. So half of these people are disabled. I've heard it said Lenin himself was a giant mushroom. Wow. That would explain a lot. That Lenin was just like living in this like psychedelic plane of existence, and that's why he was so successful as a revolutionary and as a leader. Hey, looks like the Hollywood is going on strike too, like the backstage workers and stuff. Hey, Nine Tails, haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you. Yeah. Hollywood is always doing that shit. Like, we always remember the writer's strike. Do you guys remember the writer's strike? Happened not too long ago. There's Hollywood is they know how to get shit done. Like, the unions that exist in Hollywood are real and powerful, and routinely win. Like, this is the thing about like the anti-unionists. It's like they can't really point to a reason why people shouldn't unionize under this antagonistic system. And the writer's strike was completely successful for the writers. They got everything they wanted, right? They got everything they wanted. Like, if you guys don't know, the reason why the writer's strike happened was because the contracts that had been drawn up between the Writers Guild and everybody else, hey Amanda, how you doing, did not include internet services whatsoever, which makes complete and total sense, right? Like, the internet wasn't really a thing. There wasn't really any distributing platforms. There wasn't anything like that. And so the owners of everything began sidestepping the writers when big sales happened. So like a big sale happened, I forget which organizations, but there was like a multi-million-dollar sale that the writers did not get a piece of whatsoever because their contracts didn't say web sales, right? And when that happened, and when it was made clear to the writers and the Writers Guild that they would be cut out of these arrangements, they instantly went on strike. It was like straight up 100% like instant strike vote. The owners, of course, were saying things like, no, now's not a good time to strike, because they wanted to push through all of these things and not give the writers their cut. And the writers were very straightforward. They were just like, no, you guys are assholes. Go fuck yourselves. Give us our money. We're going to redraw these contracts and we're going to include web services, obviously. And they got the runaround for a little while. But once it became obvious, like there were major projects that got completely fucked over because of the writer's strike. Like Battlestar Galactica, I think season 3 or 4 was worthless. Complete garbage season because of the writer's strike. Quantum of Solace was like a James Bond movie that got completely destroyed. It was like the crappiest movie ever because of the writer's strike. And once it became obvious that like, oh yeah, we can't just produce schlock, people they're noticing, oh, it turns out that writing is actually a job that is difficult to do. So the writers got everything they wanted. Right? And nobody really reported on it. It wasn't that big of a story when it should have been like a national story that the writers went on strike and the owners capitulated completely. And it wasn't like the writers were going on strike for something unreasonable. Like, literally, we want to be paid for our work. And when you sell our work on a new digital platform, we want it reflected in our contract. Very straightforward. Like, very straightforward. And the owners did everything they could to prevent it. And it literally took like the destruction of several projects before things started to improve. He looks like an old jack-o'-lantern in December. You're talking about Soros? Yeah, he's just like, his face does seem to be melting. Lenin was a mushroom, was a highly influential televised hoax by Soviet musician Sergei Kuryokhin and reporter there is definitely like a cultural thing that I'm missing here. Like, who would actually believe this? I love the idea that some producers suggesting that their nephew can finish the season. Yeah, got a gold star for an essay, and yeah, like, and it just shows you the level of disrespect that the owners have for the arts, right? That and the society generally has for the arts. That like this denigration of the arts is ubiquitous, and there has been small changes. So like we all know STEM, like STEM research and all this kind of stuff. Well, now that's been changed to STEAM recently because they added in the A for arts, right? Because there's been a general recognition throughout the STEM movement that like, oh yeah, if you don't have like creativity, if there's nobody actually like even imagining new things, then you can't design or do anything, right? Yeah. Art is labor. How many times have I got to teach you this lesson, old man? Infinite. As long as the system is structured this way, there will always be an owner who says, oh, we cannot pay you for that. Like, this is the goal of the capitalist class, is to pay $0. Like, they want to pay nothing. Why do you think internships exist? Like these systems to convince gullible rubes and a gullible population to accept labor for nothing, right? Like, that's the goal. The goal is to return the society back to just outright slavery. And to pretend like the capitalists are not always attempting to do that, I think requires a little bit of a delusional outlook. Like, Nestle, for example, keeps outright admitting that it uses slave labor. Like, it keeps doing it, where it says things like, well, if we have to report how much slave labor we use, then that's going to really increase the price of our product. So it's like, oh, okay, so like straight out you're admitting that you're using slave labor. And like the whole conversation between shipping jobs overseas, right? The whole NAFTA conversation literally was about finding slaves. Like that's what it is. And here in Canada, we've got something called the Temporary Foreign Workers Program, right? So it's in the title, right? Temporary Foreign Workers Program. So what this is it's a way to scoop up like all those kids living in concentration camps down in the southern border, right? So the Canadian government comes and scoops up a bunch of them, right? Jams them onto fields to pick strawberries, pays them $2 an hour, and I don't know if it's actually $2 an hour, but it's definitely under the minimum wage. It's literally embedded in our legislation that there is a second class of citizenry here in Canada, just completely disposable, no rights, no freedoms. They're not allowed to vote. They're not really part of the system. And once we're done with their labor, we can deport them, and we do, right? Like, and this is a well-established system that both the conservatives and the liberals support. The Temporary Foreign Workers Program is one of these like slave systems that capitalists will always erect, right? That's what the capitalist system is always attempting to do. Again, it's a real show of the force of humanity itself that we have managed to actually get rid of even chattel slavery, and that took a war, right? It took a war, a bloody and destructive war, in order to do, and it always pays to remember that all the gains we have made are in spite of the system, not because of it, and that's the thing that we should be saying to these quote unquote defenders of Western civilization all the time, right? Because they pretend as though we've gotten to where we are because of the system, and it's just completely false. We are where we are in spite of the system. That the system is designed not only to destroy us, but then destroy itself, which over the pandemic we've watched it do. We're watching it destroy itself. Like, it's very straightforward. Hey Ruth, how you doing? Good to see you. Always good to see you, Ruth. One of the first people to actually come in, and you've been here since the beginning. I think I said this to you recently, Ruth. I gotta tell you guys, like, it's humbling. It's humbling to know that there are people in the world who you guys keep coming back, you know, because my big fear is that you guys will all just move on, right? And I mean, and as one does, like, I used to listen to Joe Rogan a whole lot, and now I don't, like, and people move on, but it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing that you guys keep coming in here, and we keep having these talks, and we keep finding solidarity with one another, and hopefully one day I'll be able to have some big rally or something, and we can all actually get together and meet. We are here in spite of the system, not because of it, the Canadian commie. Yeah, that's right. Quote me on it. Quote me on it. And that's true across the board. Capitalism has never delivered anything ever. Ever. It's never delivered anything ever. And anytime somebody stands up and says, oh, yeah, well, you've got